In 1810, education was based on the social and moral needs of the penal colony and was largely focused on biblical studies led by untrained chaplains or women. In the mid to late 1800s, there was a focus on the three R's and on ensuring children were ready to participate in the industrial workforce to ensure economic growth. In 1920, education became compulsory in Australia, and the industrial model emphasised uniform learning across all schools. From 1970 to 1990, there was a shift in focus to concern the child's personal future and interest, not the national economic future. Open classrooms were introduced to reflect a changing world. 2018 and beyond. The world is changing and education needs to meet contemporary English demands. The definition of what it means to be literate is changing as the world around us changes. I believe that socio-cultural demands and the need to develop critical thinking skills are driving change in the teaching and learning of literacy. Tim Moss explains that demands upon what it means to be literate and our knowledge and understanding of language change based on time and place, and Ludwig adds that literacies respond to societal demands and change over time. Social and cultural demands impact on children's experiences and their consequent understandings of literacy. Seeley, Flint, and others highlight that literacy practices are used to achieve different goals, and the classroom should replicate this. Often these goals have social justifications. Seeley, Flint, and others also draw attention to the different racial, ethnic, and cultural groups in a classroom and how the interactions that take place in the classroom invite students to bring diverse literacy experiences from both outside and inside the classroom, and that students may need to use this background knowledge and cultural understanding to make sense of texts. Ludwig contends that schools must develop students' literacies to reflect the diverse economic, social, and cultural demands. Another assertion of Seeley, Flint, and others is that students are likely to practice meaning making and interpretation of texts in their everyday social context, including but not limited to instant messaging, websites, music lists, and magazines. Finally, Derwianka and Jones emphasise the importance of students learning how language is used for different purposes in different social contexts. As cited in Ludwig, Green's three-dimensional model of literacy demands explains that these demands can be classified as critical, operational, or cultural. Social and cultural demands are described in Green's cultural dimension, where students must have knowledge of the contexts in which language is used, as described by Ludwig. Examples of this include formal and informal language settings, different 21st century written, symbolic, and spoken communication methods incorporating technology, and increased demand for collaboration and communicative language skills in the workplace, as explained by Brunegis. Luke and Freebody present four similar literacy demands in the four resources model. The contemporary English classroom needs to ensure that students understand the purpose of text and can structure and use text for a specific purpose. Ludwig and Emmett and others purport that these demands align with the text using dimension. Social and cultural demands also require students to understand the topic and context and use their background knowledge and experience to add to their understanding of a text. Emmett and others explain that this correlates with the text participating or text meaning maker aspect of the four demands model. In the 21st century, students can make connections not only with their own experiences and other texts that they've read, but with other contexts due to the interconnected nature of the world. The Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority's English learning area of the Australian curriculum responds to contemporary social and cultural demands. With a particular focus on the Year 5 curriculum, responses to these demands can be seen across content descriptors in the language, literature, and literacy strands of the English curriculum. The use of context to determine meaning and the variation in text purpose and subsequent formality are addressed in the language area. Students must learn how to use vocabulary, purpose and structure of language in appropriate context. The literature strand draws on students' prior experiences with texts when creating literary texts, and also the identification of social, cultural, and historical contexts in text. Finally, understanding is increased through connection with previous experiences and to the context of informal and formal situations in the literacy strand. Critical thinking is an essential contemporary English skill. Islam highlights that students need to learn to separate facts from opinion, make rational inferences, and examine issues by seeing all sides to an argument. This is supported by Patel, Stevens, and Bean, who cite the overwhelming amount of text in the 21st century of all genres and discuss varying authenticity, biases, and reliability of information. Masters contends that in order to prepare students for life and work in the 21st century, we must ensure that they learn how to think critically, and Patel, Stevens, and Bean link this to literacy through the idea that text should be approached with skepticism and consideration of context. As cited in Patel, Stevens, and Bean, Lancashire and Noble state that it is estimated that citizens of the 21st century spend around 60% of their time consuming some form of media, and Johnson estimates that people are exposed to more than 350 advertisements per day. For this reason, students need to gain the skills to evaluate how they are being positioned, which viewpoints are included and excluded, and how this is impacting on their own understandings, wants, needs, and identity. Ludwig's description of Green's three-dimensional model of literacy demands can again be drawn upon, as the critical dimension requires students to understand that texts represent a specific point of view and that other points of view are excluded. Similarly, the four resources model can be applied through the text analyst dimension. Emmett and others explain that this dimension requires the student to interrogate the text for values and understand that ideas and information from texts are not neutral, and Ludwig emphasizes understanding that there are different viewpoints which are represented and silenced. The Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority's English Learning area of the Australian curriculum responds to the need for critical thinking. Again, responses across the language, literature, and literacy strands have been selected. The language strand encourages students to realise different perspectives and points of view, as does the literature strand. The literature strand goes further, however, and addresses the interpretations that can result from different viewpoints being conveyed, and also emphasises the forming of viewpoints about literary texts. The literacy strand again focuses on point of view, but instead addresses the need to examine vocabulary, expressions, and different types of language. Additionally, this strand addresses the use of comprehension strategies to analyse the vast array of information that students are presented with in all formats. It is recommended that different text types, formats, and genres are used in schools to increase critical literacy skills and link to sociocultural factors and experiences in the lives of our students, with the aim of increasing understanding and meeting the literary demands of the 21st century.